Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. We're here to help you cut through the noise and get straight to the insights you need. Today, our focus is on an upcoming earnings report for a major player in the Chinese internet and entertainment space, Bilibili.
That's right. For those of you tracking the digital landscape, Bilibili is, well, it's a name you certainly know. This session is really all about what to watch as they release their next quarterly numbers. We'll be breaking down, analyst expectations, past performance, and critically, what underlying factors might really move the stock.
And hey, if you find this kind of breakdown helpful, please do hit that subscribe button, like this episode, and maybe leave us a comment. It really helps us out. And speaking of comments, if there's a specific company you'd like us to look into for a future session, just drop its name in the comments section below. Also, if you're enjoying our work, maybe consider buying us a coffee. I'm always appreciate your support. Okay, now let's unpack Bilibili's earnings outlook. So let's kick things off with the essentials. When can we actually expect to hear from Bilibili?
The report is scheduled for August 21st, 2025. That's right before the U.S. market opens. And there will also be a conference call at 8:00 a.m. Eastern Time, which is, always worth a listen if you want to hear management's direct commentary.
Right, get it straight from the source. And what are analysts generally expecting from Bilibili this quarter? What's the consensus looking like?
Well, for revenue, it's actually quite interesting this time around. There isn't a widely published tight consensus figure.
Oh, really? That's unusual.
It is a bit. But looking at past quarters, we've seen revenues typically fall in the range of, say, 5 to 5.8 billion RMB. That's Chinese yuan. The general chatter among analysts suggests we should probably anticipate a continued year-over-year increase. It reflects Bilibili's, consistent growth path. Now, for earnings per share, or EPS, that's profit per share, the consensus is much tighter. It's ranging from about $0.16 to 17 cents per share.
Okay. So revenue's a bit fuzzy, but EPS is clearer. Does that lack of a tight revenue consensus imply maybe a wider range of possibilities, or just less focus on that number? And are there any whisper numbers floating around, those unofficial expectations?
Yeah, it seems to point towards analysts focusing more on the bottom line, the profitability, as Bilibili pivots its strategy. As for whisper numbers, no, we couldn't find any widely reported figures for Bilibili this quarter.
Okay.
That often means the market is maybe less polarized on a surprise revenue figure and more just aligned with the strategy management's been communicating.
Right. And what about the company's own guidance from previous reports? Did they give any hints?
They haven't provided explicit guidance for Q2 2025.
Yeah.
But look, in prior quarters, management consistently emphasized continued user growth, ongoing margin improvements, and a strong focus on monetization. They've repeatedly noted this trend of steady top-line expansion and narrowing losses.
Gotcha.
So that consistent messaging gives us a pretty strong lens through which to view their upcoming results. They're clearly signaling this path to profitability.
Okay, knowing what's expected is one thing, but how has Bilibili actually performed against those expectations in the past? Do they tend to surprise, or are they usually pretty much in line?
They do have a compelling history surprising on the upside, especially on the earnings per share front.
Okay.
In Q1 2025, for example, their EPS came in at 12 cents. That beat the consensus by significant $0.04, which is actually a 100% surprise beat.
Wow, 100%.
Yeah. And in Q4 2024, they beat EPS by $0.02. If we look back maybe to Q2 2024, they delivered an even larger beat, coming in at 19 cents above expectations.
So mostly beats, which sounds pretty promising, but have there been any significant misses recently? Any downsides?
Only one narrow miss in the last 4 quarters, really. That was Q3 2024. EPS was just $0.01 below consensus, and the revenue was pretty much in line.
Okay, just a penny off.
Exactly. So overall, it's a pretty consistent positive trend in beating expectations, particularly on earnings per share.
That's definitely a strong track record. But how has the stock itself reacted right after these reports? I mean, does a beat always lead to a sustained rally, or is the picture more, nuanced?
That's where it gets really interesting. And it's, I think, a crucial lesson for investors here. After that impressive Q1 2025 beat we mentioned, the stock initially popped up 6%.
Nice start.
But then it faded right back to flat after just 2 days.
Oh.
And in Q4 2024, it gapped up about 5%. But then retraced half those gains by the end of the week.
So not holding the gains.
Not consistently.
Yeah.
Q3 2024 being that narrow miss, saw very little movement. And even the Q2 2024 beat, which was quite significant on paper, led to only a small gap up, maybe 3%. It largely held those gains, but it wasn't exactly a massive breakout.
That is fascinating. Strong beats, but the stock doesn't always follow through long term. Why do you think that is?
Well, what's fascinating here is exactly that strong beats haven't consistently translated into sustained post-earnings rallies. This pattern often suggests that maybe broader macroeconomic sentiment in China, or perhaps specific sector headwinds, might be overshadowing the individual company performance.
Right. The bigger picture interfering.
Exactly. It's almost like a buy the rumor, sell the news dynamic sometimes with Bilibili. It signals that investors might be using an earnings beat as like an opportunity to take profits rather than a signal for a new sustained upward trend.
Makes sense.
It really highlights that for Chinese tech stocks, earnings are just one piece of a very complex puzzle.
Absolutely. So beyond those headline numbers, what about some of the core operational metrics for Bilibili? What trends have we been seeing there? Let's look under the hood.
Yeah, good question. Because that raises the important point.
Oh, the fundamental health of the business.
Right. Monthly active users, or MAU, they've been growing steadily each quarter. That's crucial for a platform like Bilibili that really thrives on community engagement.
Okay, steady growth there.
And gross margins are also on a clear improving trend. Last reported around 24%.
That's good.
Yeah, it indicates better cost management and increasing monetization efficiency. And importantly, operating income losses. They've been gradually narrowing.
Closing the gap.
Exactly. It reflects their discipline in spending and these persistent efforts to monetize the platform more effectively, moving closer to profitability. So these are all pretty positive signals for the company's underlying operational health.
Okay, that context is helpful. Now, looking specifically at the quarter that just ended, were there any major announcements, like significant developments, big product launches, acquisitions, anything like that? Anything that could materially impact these upcoming results?
You know, surprisingly, no. No major product launches or acquisitions were announced during the quarter itself.
Huh. Quiet quarter then?
Relatively, yeah. We saw incremental platform updates, which are, pretty routine, various content partnerships, but nothing that you'd really call a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing that might drastically alter expectations, either positively or negatively.
Interesting.
So this means the focus will largely remain on their sort of organic performance and the continued execution of their existing strategy.
Got it. So given that, what about the broader industry and economic environment in China? How does that factor into Bilibili's outlook? We know the macro picture can really set the stage.
Yeah, it really can. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Chinese internet and entertainment sector has certainly seen stable but somewhat cautious advertiser sentiment.
Cautious, okay.
The regulatory outlook is mostly unchanged, which is generally a good thing, as it means no new major crackdowns.
Right, stability there at least.
But there's always that sort of lingering uncertainty in the background that keeps investors maybe a bit on edge. On the positive side, consumer engagement, particularly among Gen Z, which is Bilibili's core demographic, remains solidly high. They're still very active on these platforms.
Okay, so the users are still there?
Definitely. However, we also have to consider the broader macroeconomic trends in China. We're seeing, moderating economic growth, kind of mixed retail sales data, and potentially lower online ad budgets across the board.
That could hurt.
Those factors could definitely weigh on Bilibili's monetization efforts, especially if advertisers pull back spending or become more selective. So it's really a mixed bag, I think, internal operational strength versus these external economic headwinds.
Right, a balancing act. And given all these factors, what are analysts currently saying? Have there been any major shifts in sentiment recently? Upgrades, downgrades?
Actually, there haven't been any major upgrades or downgrades in the past month. That indicates a relatively stable outlook from the analyst community.
Okay.
The consensus from analysts seems to remain cautious but constructive.
Cautious but constructive.
Right.
What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it suggests they acknowledge the broader economic challenges, but still see long-term potential in Bilibili's business model and its user base. They're still emphasizing user growth as a key driver, naturally, but their focus has really sharpened on the company's path to profitability.
Right, the bottom line again.
Exactly. Several analysts specifically highlight margin improvement as the key factor for any potential re-rating of the stock. It tells us they're looking for operational efficiency gains just as much as, if not more than, pure top-line growth right now.
Makes sense. All right, let's talk about the stock itself. What has Bilibili's price action looked like leading into this report? Has it been, choppy or more stable?
The stock has actually traded pretty sideways for most of the past month, sort of consolidating or maybe catching its breath, which generally suggests balanced expectations for the market. It's been a bit of a tug of war between, bullish hopes and bearish concerns. However, there has been a slight uptick, maybe about 2% over the 5 trading days just before the report date.
A little bit of optimism creeping in, maybe?
Possibly, yeah. Hinting that perhaps some optimistic positioning is happening right before the numbers come out.
And for those who follow options trading, what does the options market tell us? What are the expectations for price movement around this report? That often gives us a sense of anticipated volatility, right?
That certainly can, yeah. The open interest, that's the total number of options contracts still active, is tilted towards calls. We're seeing approximately 1.3 times more open call contracts than put contracts.
Okay, so more calls than puts. Remind us what that implies.
Right, so a call option gives the holder the right to buy the stock at a certain price, typically a bullish bet. A put option gives the right to sell, usually a bearish bet. So this tilt towards calls suggests that at least some market participants are positioning for a more bullish move, an upward move in the stock price.
Gotcha.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that the options market is pricing in a roughly plus or minus 8% move for the reporting week.
8%, that's quite a swing.
It is, and it's slightly above Bilibili's median realized earnings volatility.
Yeah.
That's how much the stock has actually moved in the past, right after earnings, which typically hovers around 6% to 7%.
So the market's expecting a bigger move than usual this time.
Exactly. The fact that implied volatility, what options traders are expecting, is higher, suggests the market anticipates a slightly larger than usual reaction, maybe because of that lack of a tight revenue consensus or just the ongoing macro uncertainty in China we talked about.
Interesting. So traders are bracing for a potentially bigger swing.
Seems like it, yeah.
Okay, so with all that context, painting both the fundamental and the technical picture, what are the sort of best case and worst case scenarios for Bilibili's earnings report?
Right, let's look at the two sides. The bullish case, that would involve a strong beat on EPS, maybe getting above the $0.18 per share, and importantly, supported by robust, say, double-digit revenue growth. You'd really want to see clear evidence of sustained margin expansion, ideally pushing beyond that 24% gross margin figure we mentioned, showing increased operational efficiency. Critically robust user engagement metrics, not just MAU growth, but maybe deeper interaction, higher average revenue per user. Those would be key.
Right, quality over just quantity.
Exactly. And positive guidance for the second half of 2025, especially explicit comments on accelerating monetization success or maybe faster paid user growth. That would be a huge boost. It would signal their path to profitability is really solidifying.
Okay, that's the bright side. And what about the flip side, the bearish scenario? What would a negative surprise look like?
Yeah, the bearish case, that would be obviously a miss on either the top line revenue or the bottom line EPS.
Yeah.
You'd see worrying signs like slowing monthly active users or maybe even declining engagement metrics. That would really question their core user base health.
That'd be bad.
Very bad. Critically, if margins stagnate or even compress, maybe reflecting rising costs or just failed monetization efforts, that would be a very negative signal. And of course, weak or vague guidance for the next quarter, or any renewed concerns about regulatory hurdles or competitive pressures, those would also weigh heavily on the stock.
Right.
Basically, any indication that their path to profitability is stumbling would likely be met with some swift selling, I'd imagine.
Okay. Given everything we've discussed, all these data points, potential scenarios, what's the single most important metric you think listeners should really be watching when the report comes out? What truly cuts through the noise for Bilibili right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. What truly drives Bilibili's future as it matures? For me, look, it's all about monthly active users, MAU, and perhaps even more importantly now, paid user conversion.
MAU and conversion.
Oh,
Okay.
Right. While MAU growth tells us if they're still expanding their reach, their ability to effectively convert those users into their paid or premium segments, that's absolutely crucial now. This conversion rate and the average revenue they can actually extract from those paying users, that's what will define Bilibili's success as it continues this pivot toward higher margin monetization and ultimately sustainable profitability.
So it's not just about attracting eyeballs anymore.
Exactly. It's about opening wallets, effectively.
Right. Okay, bringing it all together then, what's your overall leaning or maybe confidence level heading into this Bilibili report? How would you summarize the risk-reward picture here?
My overall leaning is probably neutral, maybe with a modest bullish tilt. The risk-reward appears relatively balanced to me, but perhaps with slightly more upside potential if those margin trends continue to hold up.
Okay.
But there's clear vulnerability if they miss on revenue or user engagement. especially given that broader Chinese macro environment we discussed. So on a scale of 1 to 10 for confidence, I'd probably put it at about a 6.
That's 6. Okay.
Yeah. Their recent history of beating estimates and their clear discipline in improving margins, that warrants some moderate optimism. But the broader Chinese economic dynamics and the sector volatility definitely mute that conviction a bit.
It's a company with strong internal drivers, but in a challenging external landscape.
That sums it up pretty well, yes.
Okay. So, for our listeners who might be considering what to do around this earnings report, what are some general strategy considerations? What should investors think about?
Well, for risk-averse investors, my advice would generally be to maybe avoid holding the common stock directly through the earnings announcement.
Sit it out.
Potentially, yeah. It's often best to wait for the report, get the clear numbers, listen to the company's outlook on the call, and then make a move. The unpredictable post-earnings price action we saw for Bilibili, even after beats, kind of reinforces this cautious approach.
Makes sense. And for more risk-tolerant investors.
Right. For risk-tolerant investors, short-term option strategies could be attractive. For example, maybe a straddle. That's where you buy both a call and a put option at the same strike price and expiration date, essentially betting on a large move in either direction.
Betting on volatility itself.
Exactly. That could be interesting, especially given that implied volatility and the priced-in plus or minus 8% move we talked about. Or perhaps, low-cost call spreads, which are a defined risk-bullish strategy. However, I'd probably caution against making big outright directional bets unless your conviction significantly increases after you hear their guidance and see how those crucial MAU and paid user conversion numbers are trending.
Got it. So be nimble, maybe use options if you have the tolerance, but wait for confirmation.
That's generally a prudent approach around earnings, especially for a stock like this.
So there you have it, a pretty comprehensive breakdown of what to watch for with Bilibili's upcoming earnings. It's really not just about the headline numbers, is it? It's understanding the trends, the context, and what's driving the underlying business.
Absolutely. The key here is to see how Bilibili navigates that balance between its continued user growth, which is still important, and its relentless drive towards profitability, all within that complex and, frankly, evolving Chinese market environment.
Right. How will Bilibili's ability to truly monetize that massive Gen Z user base shape its long-term trajectory, especially in the global tech landscape, and as the Chinese economy itself continues its own transformations? Keep that question in mind as you watch these numbers unfold. We hope this session has given you a clearer picture. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on Investing Talk Podcast.